Science likes to pretend, and this is the fiction that they tell themselves, that science is absolute.
Hmm.
And they will say, oh, I've done this experiment and I've come to this conclusion. And you have to, if you're a good scientist, say back to them, okay, well, what is your margin for error, your standard deviation? All of these little statistical tools that show, well, you're not 100% sure, are you? And even if you're 99.99% sure, you're still not 100% sure. And science can say legitimately that, well, I am 99.99% sure. And that's better than your 85% sure. And we say, yes, okay. Is it not the case in any scientific experiment that there is this threshold? I forget the exact term off the top of my head now, but there's kind of this accuracy thing. How much can you get to that? How close can you get to that 100%? And with certain sets of instrumentation or measurement capabilities or conditions of the experiment, you can't get as close on this type of issue than you can on other types of issues, so experiments and measurements that you're making. And the problem with life is because it is so complicated, and nothing is more complicated than human society, you're never going to be able to get anywhere close to that type of scientific precision. And people have tried. I think of Auguste Comte, who thought that everything in human society will be able to be measured and understood with the precision of a physics experiment. And here we are 200 years later, and we're nowhere closer to that. And I don't think we ever will be. But if we have only 85% accuracy, well, that's what we have to do. Kierkegaard said it very well. We are beings who must choose and act.
Hmm.
Time goes long. The decisions have to be made. And you can't just sit there and say, okay, I'm waiting until
Hmm.
I have a certain, no, you have to decide. Again, William James called these are live options. These are real decisions that we have to make. And so whether we have absolute certainty or not is almost beside the point. It's not unimportant, but we are beings who must choose and act. And so we have to go with what we have.
Yeah, see, totally agree. And the implication to that for me is you're absolutely right. We have to act, we have to make decisions, even with uncertainty, even with incomplete information. Where it leads me to is a question of conviction, right? Because the implication to that for me would be we should never have that much conviction, though, right? And that's a spectrum in and of itself. But let me put it more simply, we should never have certainty. And even conviction starts to get funny, though, because in the spirit of that, I could acknowledge that I have to act, I have to make a decision. But to have so much conviction that I'm willing to try and either force it on somebody else, or I am willing to try and harm somebody else because I disagree with the way they're doing it and they don't see the way I do. That's what always baffles me. And to make it real with a real example of where this gets tricky, just one that, off the top of my head. So take a concept, right? Should we beat our children? Right? We can look at a bunch of scientific evidence. We can kind of moralistically, philosophically, just kind of think about it. We can emotionally view it and look at it, and maybe and let's just pick a number that says 85% certain, that says we shouldn't do that. That's a bad practice for us. Now, in the spirit of exactly what we're talking about, most of society can come on board with that and say we have to make decisions, so that's the decision we're going to go with. But if somebody sees it differently, and let's say they're being a good faith actor and they're acting genuinely and they're being thoughtful and they say, I understand there's some negatives to this, but I actually think society as a whole over the long term is going to benefit if we do this because it's going to allow us to act, whatever the statement you want to make is, in a more streamlined and I'm not endorsing child abuse, by the way, but just as the example, it's going to give us benefits that are going to work in that way. How do I, as somebody that sits on that side that says we should not abuse children, ever tell that person you can't do that? Because that delta, that 85%, doesn't allow me the conviction or confidence to say you're wrong, that's the wrong thing to do. So how do we function in a society like that where we can never with certainty or confidence tell somebody that's not the right way to act?
This is where the authenticity idea comes
Okay.
in my mind. And why I say that is that we have to, as beings who must choose an act and beings who hopefully wish to act ethically and for the benefit of other people, have to take into account not just rules. Rules are good, but particular situations. I'm not a Kantian in terms of ethics, in that there is the categorical imperative of, lying is always wrong is one of the classic examples. Therefore, you should never lie, even if lying would save a life and cause no other harm. Lying is wrong in and of itself. Authenticity, I think, demands seeing particular situations and particular people within those situations. And an issue of conviction, is the conviction to the rule or is conviction to the person?
Hmm.
And I I can't remember when I've ever decided otherwise. My decision is always the conviction to the person
Hmm.
that I'm dealing with or the people that I'm dealing with. And the authenticity comes into that is that, again, if we know who these people are, what the situation is, and it can be an authentic view of the situation, not just an authentic view of the person. But honoring the person means taking into account who they are, what the situation is, what's best for that person in that situation. Now, of course, you can come back. I'm sure you're already thinking, yeah, but the conviction thing that I'm talking about, which I can't be absolutely sure
Mhm.
of that I really know what the person, who this person is, what is really best for this person, what is really the best decision in this situation, and whether I can try to really throw my conviction 100% behind this decision right now, and knowing all those unknowns or relative uncertainties. And the answer is, well, you're going to have to make a choice anyway. So if you're going to have to make a choice anyway, and this goes back to James's thing about making choices, that you have to make the choice. Then the best way to make the choice is resting on that authenticity, and then your conviction is to the ethical value of honoring people as their authentic selves, as people. Now, of course, it's like, oh, there's gray areas here and gray areas there, there's ifs, ands, and buts. Yeah, but that's the reality of things. That's not relativism. I do want to say that if anyone is thinking out there that, oh, he's reading work with relativists. No, because relativism quickly slides into anyone can have their own opinions. And here's where I will kind of side with Aristotle on this, where he says that the proper course lies in the mean that is relative to the situation. And now he meant the mean very literally. You take the two extremes and you find the middle ground, and that's the right decision. And it's a rational decision. And I don't agree with the mean idea. I don't agree with the completely 100% rationality idea. But the basic idea of the situation has to be made, taken into account, and the decision made relative to that situation. When you bring in all other aspects of what's going on, who are involved, and what your own values are, authenticity of yourself, you have to be true to yourself when you make ethical decisions as well. You take all of that into consideration, and then you make your decisions because you have no other choices a lot of the time.